The sky above the capital city of Oakhaven was not black, but a bruised and swollen purple, the color of a vein struck too many times. On the planet Vale, darkness was not an absence of light. It was a physical weight, a heavy velvet shroud that pressed down on the obsidian spires, piercing the clouds like jagged needles. Princess Serelith stood on the balcony of the Spire of Silence, her hands gripping the cold railing. Below her, the city breathed. It was a literal sound. The vein rail transport system, a subterranean network of living bioluminescent transit tubes, hummed beneath the streets. The vibration traveled up through the foundations of the palace, trembling against the soles of her boots. It sounded like a heartbeat, massive and slow, thumping in time with the orbital blood harvest stations drifting in the upper atmosphere. Those stations were mere sparks of red light from here. But Serelith knew exactly what happened inside them. The crimson tax. The price the donor worlds paid to keep the Empire from descending to their surfaces to feed directly. She hated the hum. It reminded her that the entire civilization of Vale was a parasite dressed in silk and steel. "Your Highness," a voice chimed from the wall panel behind her. "The High Council is assembled. The human has arrived." Serelith turned, her reflection caught in the polished black glass of the balcony doors. She looked every inch the monster the galaxy feared. Her skin was the color of moonlight on snow. Flawless and terrifyingly pale, her eyes were pools of liquid onyx, currently devoid of the red hunger haze that only appeared when she lost control. She wore the ceremonial armor of the Crimson Court, a bodice of molded plasteel that looked like an exposed ribcage, dipped in gold. "I am coming," Serelith said. Her voice was low, a vibrato that commanded attention without shouting. She swept into the corridor, her long cloak trailing behind her like a shadow that had detached itself from the floor. She was tired. It was a deep, marrow-level exhaustion that no amount of sleep or synthetic blood wine could cure. The court rituals were a dance on the edge of a razor. One misstep, one show of compassion, and the purity hardliners would tear her throat out. They viewed mercy as a sickness. To them, humans were cattle, and the donor worlds were nothing more than free-range farms. Now, because the donor planets were whispering of rebellion, the Emperor had arranged a political marriage, a peace symbol, a human husband for the vampire princess. It was a farce. Serelith knew it. The court knew it. The human was a lamb being walked into a den of wolves to prove the wolves could behave themselves. She reached the great double doors of the throne room. The guards, 7 feet tall and armored in matte black chitons, slammed their spears against the floor. The doors groaned open. The air inside the throne room was kept at a freezing temperature, just the way the elders liked it. The architecture was a fusion of ancient Gothic cathedral and high-tech command center. Stone gargoyles perched next to floating holographic interfaces. The ceiling was lost in shadow, but the central nervous system of the room was the projection pit in the center of the floor. Holographic constellations dripped into the air like liquid ink. They swirled and coalesced, forming maps of the galaxy, trade routes, and the current blood yield percentages. Standing in the middle of this swirling data stream was a man. He looked impossibly small. Eli Ward, that was his name. He was a diplomat scribe from Earth, a mid-level functionary chosen because his genetic profile was considered benign and his psychological profile listed him as docile. He wore a simple gray suit that looked rough and textural compared to the sleek, liquid fabrics of the Vale nobility. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching a hologram of a red star dissolve into black smoke. Serelith ascended the dais to sit at the right hand of her father's empty throne. The Emperor was indisposed, another lie, leaving her to manage the spectacle. The room was silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on the human. The vampires of the court stood in the shadows of the colonnades, statues of predatory stillness. They were smelling him. Sarilith could feel the collective hunger in the room. It was a static charge in the air, prickly and hot. She could smell him too. He smelled of iron, salt, and something frantic, like a bird trapped in a house. Chancellor Vulcan stepped forward. Vulcan was the architect of the purity movement, a creature of exquisite manners and lethal intent. He wore robes of deep crimson, and his white hair was pulled back severely from a face that had not aged in 400 years. Presenting the emissary of the Terran coalition, Vulcan announced, his voice smooth as oil. Eli Ward. Eli turned. He did not bow immediately. He looked up at the dais, scanning the empty throne, and then his eyes landed on Sarilith. For a moment, Sarilith stopped breathing. Humans usually looked at her with terror or sycophancy. Eli Ward looked at her with confusion. He blinked behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses, an affectation, surely, in an age of corrective surgery. "Your Highness," Eli said. He bowed then, a clumsy folding motion that lacked all the fluid grace of the veil. "You stand before the Crimson Court," Sarilith said. Her voice was amplified by the acoustics of the room, booming slightly. "We accept your presence as a token of the armistice." Eli straightened up. He looked around the room, taking in the hundreds of silent, staring predators, and then looked back at the dripping holographic ink suspended in the air next to his head. "Thank you," Eli said. His voice was not booming. It was a tenor, clear but decidedly human. "I have to say the brochure for the wedding did not mention the floating ink. It is very impressive. I was worried I had overdressed, but I see now I should have worn my raincoat." Silence. Absolute vacuum-sealed silence. The joke hung in the freezing air. It was a stupid, suicidal thing to say. One did not make jokes in the Crimson Court. One did not imply that the sacred ancestral data stream looked like bad weather. Sarilith felt a muscle in her jaw twitch. She fought it. She fought the urge to curl her lip, but more dangerously, she fought the urge to smile. It was so absurd. He was standing in a room full of creatures who viewed him as a sandwich, and he was making a self-deprecating comment about his suit. Chancellor Vulcan did not smile. He stepped closer to Eli, looming over him. "Humor is a luxury of the living, Mr. Ward," Vulcan said softly. "You would do well to remember that your status here is conditional." "Right," Eli said, nodding quickly. "No jokes. Solemnity only. I can do solemn. I am a scribe, after all. We are the most boring people in the galaxy." He smiled then. It was a nervous, crooked expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Sarilith stood up. The movement cut through the tension like a blade. "The ceremony is concluded," she declared. "Take him to his quarters." As the guards moved to escort him, Eli glanced back at her. For a second, just 1 second, the nervous energy dropped from his face. His eyes, a muddy hazel color, locked onto hers with a clarity that unsettled her. He was not looking at her rank. He was looking at her. Then he was gone, marched out between the black-armored sentinels, leaving Sarilith alone with the sharks. 2 hours later, Sarilith entered the private suite that had been assigned to her new husband. It was a lavish prison. The walls were draped in heavy tapestries depicting the great hunts of the First Age, and the furniture was carved from bone wood. Eli was standing by the window, looking out at the city. The purple sky was darkening to absolute black, and the lights of the vein rails were glowing brighter, a web of neon violet pulsing through the metropolis. He turned when the door hissed shut. He had taken off his jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. His forearms were lean, roped with sinew. He looked startlingly alive against the backdrop of the dead room. "Princess," he said. He did not bow this time. Sarilith stalked into the room. She moved with predatory purpose, removing her heavy cloak and tossing it onto a chair. She wanted to intimidate him. She wanted to see if the bravery in the throne room was real or just a panic response. "Do you understand what you are doing here?" "Eli Ward?" she asked, stopping only 3 feet from him. The proximity hit them both. To Sarilith, the smell of his blood was sudden and overwhelming. It was a sweet, heavy scent, thumping in the carotid artery of his neck. She could hear his heart rate accelerate, 70 beats per minute jumping to 90. To Eli, she must have been terrifying. She was taller than him in her boots, and her presence was like a cold front moving into a warm room. "I am here to be a husband," Eli said. He held his ground. He did not step back. "You are here to be a hostage," Sarilith corrected him. She circled him, her movements liquid. "The coalition sent you because you are expendable. If the donor worlds rebel, you will be the first thing the High Council executes. They will drain you dry on live feed to show the galaxy what happens to defiance." Eli watched her circle him. He did not tremble. His eyes tracked her movement, steady and observant. "I know," he said quietly. "You know?" Sarilith stopped in front of him again. She leaned in, her face inches from his. She bared her teeth slightly, letting the tips of her fangs catch the light. "Then why are you not shaking?" Eli looked down at her hands. Sarilith followed his gaze. Her right hand, resting on the back of a chair, was trembling. It was a microscopic tremor, a side effect of the hunger she had been suppressing for 3 days. The stress of the court always burned through her caloric reserves faster than normal. "I am not shaking," Eli said softly, "because you are doing enough of it for both of us." Sarilith froze. She snatched her hand back, curling it into a fist. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You are hungry," Eli said. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a strange, clinical curiosity. "And you are tired. I saw you in the throne room. You hold your posture perfectly, but the muscles in your neck are knotted tight enough to snap. You look like someone who has been holding their breath for 10 years. Sarilith stared at him. No one spoke to her like this. No one noticed these things, or if they did, they were smart enough to pretend they did not. To mention a vampire's weakness was usually a death sentence. "You have a sharp eye for a scribe," Sarilith said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I just pay attention," Eli said. "It is my job. I write things down. I notice details, like the fact that you haven't blinked in 45 seconds. Sarilith blinked. She stepped back, putting distance between them. The air between them was charged, thick with a tension that was confusing. It was fear, yes, but it was also something else, a sensual undercurrent that spiked through her. His heartbeat was a rhythm she wanted to taste, but his gaze, so open, so unblinkingly honest, made her feel exposed in a way she despised. "We do not touch," she said, setting the rule immediately. "You are my husband by law, but you will never share my bed. You will not touch me. If you cut yourself, you will leave the room immediately. Is that clear?" Eli nodded slowly. "Crystal clear. No touching. No bleeding. Good." She turned to leave. She needed to get away from him. He was too warm, too observant. He made the room feel small. "Princess," Eli called out just as she reached the door. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. "For the record," he said, leaning back against the window, the violet light framing his silhouette. "I am not brave. I am just really bad at knowing when to shut up. Sarilith looked at him, a small, helpless human in a city of monsters, making jokes to keep the dark at bay. Then you should learn quickly, she said, or you will not survive the week. The week passed in a blur of political maneuvering. Chancellor Vulcan was playing a complex game. In public, he praised the Union, calling it a glorious step toward a unified galaxy. In private, he was tightening the screws. He scheduled public appearances for Sarilith and Eli, parading them before the court and the cameras, waiting for a mistake. The first assassination attempt happened 3 days later. It was a reception in the Hanging Gardens, a massive biodome suspended 2,000 feet above the city streets. The flora here was engineered to thrive in low light: black orchids, phosphorescent moss, and trees with weeping silver bark. The elite of Vale were gathered, holding flutes of synthetic hemoglobin. Eli stood by Sarilith's side, looking stiff in a formal tunic that buttoned to his chin. He had been surprisingly good at the small talk, deflecting insults with a dense, pleasant ignorance that baffled the vampire nobility. Suddenly, a scream cut through the polite chatter. Near the entrance, a donor envoy, a representative from one of the agricultural moons, was on his knees. A crimson guard stood behind him, a monofilament wire wrapped around the envoy's neck. "Traitor," the guard shouted. This filth was carrying contraband comms gear. It was a staged execution. Sarilith knew it instantly. It was a show of force to rattle the guests. The guard tightened the wire. The envoy gasped, blood welling up. Sarilith moved to intervene, to order the guard to stand down. But chaos erupted. The crowd surged back. In the confusion, Sarilith saw a flash of light. It was tiny, no bigger than a hummingbird. It was a microdrone, disguised as a jewel-encrusted brooch on a nearby lady's dress. It detached itself, its wings blurring into a razor-sharp disc, and shot straight for Sarilith's throat. It was moving at subsonic speed. Sarilith, distracted by the execution, was a fraction of a second too slow. She saw the glint of the metal, knew she could not dodge it in time. But Eli moved. He did not move like a scribe. He did not move like a diplomat. He moved before the drone even fully detached. He shoved a heavy ceremonial shield, a decorative piece of armor on a display stand next to him, into the air. He didn't just shove it. He angled it. Clang! The drone slammed into the gold-plated alloy of the shield, embedding itself an inch deep into the metal, exactly where Sarilith's jugular would have been. The impact knocked the shield out of Eli's hands, sending him stumbling back. The room froze. The drone buzzed angrily, stuck in the shield, its rotors stripping gears. "Guards!" Sarilith shouted, her voice shaking the glass walls of the dome. Security swarmed the area. The drone was deactivated. The guest who had been wearing it was seized, screaming that she didn't know. She didn't know. Sarilith ignored the chaos. She turned to Eli. He was rubbing his wrist, looking at the shield on the floor with a dazed expression. "Are you injured?" she demanded, grabbing his arm. Eli flinched, then looked up. No. I think I just sprained my thumb. That thing was heavy." Sarilith stared at him. Her eyes were wide, searching his face. "You saw it," she said. "Saw what?" "The drone. You moved before it launched." Eli laughed nervously. He pulled his arm gently from her grip. "I didn't see anything. I tripped. I knocked the shield over. Pure dumb luck. I told you, I'm clumsy." Sarilith narrowed her eyes. She replayed the moment in her mind. It hadn't been a trip. It had been a calculated intercept. The angle of the shield had been perfect. His center of gravity had shifted instantly. It was the reaction time of a combat veteran, or something enhanced. "You are a terrible liar." Eli Ward, she whispered. I'm a lucky husband, Your Highness, he countered, rubbing his wrist. Let's leave it at that. But as he looked away, Sarilith saw it. For just a fleeting instant, the harmless facade dropped. His eyes were not hazel anymore. They looked darker, harder. They flashed with a cold geometric calculation that vanished as quickly as it appeared. It was a look that belonged to a predator, not prey. Something warm pulsed against Sarilith's chest. She gasped, reaching for the chain around her neck. Hidden beneath her armor was her family relic, a ring of black metal, etched with blood sigils that dated back to the first pact. It was an artifact that had been cold and inert for 500 years. Now, it was hot. It was vibrating against her skin, a low, rhythmic thrumming. She looked at the ring, then at Eli. He was 10 feet away, being checked by a medic. As he moved further away, the heat in the ring faded. As the medic brought him a step closer, the ring flared again. It was reacting to him. The ancient blood magic of her ancestors, the technology that underpinned the entire empire, was waking up because a human scribe was standing near it. Sarilith felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The political marriage was a sham. The assassination attempt was a setup. But this was something else. This was impossible. She waited until they were back in the safety of the transport skiff, speeding through the vein rail tunnels back to the palace. The cabin was soundproofed, the violet lights of the tunnel streaking past the windows like elongated stars. Sarilith activated the privacy shield. She sat opposite Eli, her hands folded in her lap to hide the fact that she was clutching the ring. "Who are you?" she asked. Eli looked tired. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving him pale. "I'm Eli," he said. "Do not lie to me," she said, her voice hard. "You anticipated a mil-spec micro-drone. You handled a 60-pound shield with one hand. And—" She hesitated. She could not tell him about the ring. "Not yet. And," Eli prompted. "And you do not smell like fear anymore," she said. "You smell like anticipation." Eli looked out the window at the blur of the tunnel. He was silent for a long time. When he finally looked back at her, the humor was gone. The awkwardness was gone. Vale is a dangerous place. "Princess," he said quietly. "Maybe I studied the safety manuals more than I admitted. You will not survive this world if you just rely on luck," she said. "You need to learn restraint. You showed your hand tonight. Vulcan saw that reflex. He will wonder why a scribe has the reflexes of a soldier." Eli leaned forward. The distance between them closed. The sensual tension returned, but this time it was edged with a sharp, dangerous clarity. "And you, Princess," he said, his voice dropping to match hers. "You will not survive either unless you learn the one thing your court has forgotten." "And what is that?" "Trust," Eli said. Sarilith laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound. "Trust is a myth. On Vale, trust gets you killed." Eli sat back, the mask of the harmless husband sliding back into place, but the challenge remained in his eyes. "Then I guess we are both already dead," he said. Sarilith looked at him. She looked at the man she had been told was a harmless ornament, a fragile thing to be protected and pitied. She realized, with a jolt of genuine fear, that she had no idea what she had actually married. The ring against her chest was still warm, humming a warning, or perhaps a welcome that she did not understand. "We shall see," she said. The skiff shot out of the tunnel and toward the spire, carrying the princess and her stranger husband toward a war that had already begun, though neither of them had yet declared it. Sarilith sat alone in her chambers that night, the ring resting on the table before her. It had gone cold again the moment Eli had left her presence. She picked it up, tracing the sigils, until the blood war revealed his true. The phrase from the ancient prophecy echoed in her mind, but she could not remember how it ended. The histories had been redacted centuries ago. She went to the window. Down in the guest wing, a light was still burning in Eli's room. She watched it for a long time, wondering if she was looking at a savior or a bomb. Finally, she turned away, the hunger rising in her throat again, sharper this time. The game had changed, and for the first time in years. Sarilith was not bored. She was terrified, and she was awake. The weeks that followed the assassination attempt were a study in beautiful, suffocating boredom. The capital city of Oakhaven did not sleep, and neither, it seemed, did the Crimson Court's appetite for ritual. Sarilith decided that if Eli Ward was going to survive long enough to be useful, he needed to be less human, or at least, he needed to learn how to hide his humanity behind a veneer of apex predator indifference. The training sessions took place in the solarium, a room with high, vaulted ceilings made of polarized diamond that filtered the harsh ultraviolet radiation of the sun into a gentle twilight gloom. "No," Sarilith corrected him, pacing a circle around the chair where Eli sat. "You are tilting your head to the left. In human culture, exposing the neck is a sign of submission or trust. Here, it is an invitation. You are effectively telling every noble in the room, 'Here is my carotid artery. Please help yourself.'" Eli straightened his neck, rubbing the stiffness out of his shoulder. "I was just trying to be polite." "Politeness on Vale is not about submission," Sarilith said, her voice sharp. "It is about restraint. When you bow, you maintain eye contact. You do not lower your gaze. You are saying, 'I am dangerous enough to kill you, but I am choosing not to right now.' That is courtesy." Eli chuckled. It was a dry, scratching sound. "So, every dinner party is just a standoff with salad forks?" "Precisely." Sarilith stopped in front of him. The distance between them was less than 2 feet. She could smell him, the cedar soap he used, the salt on his skin, and beneath it all, the rich, rhythmic thrum of his pulse. It was distracting. For 300 years, Sarilith had been surrounded by the cold marble stillness of vampires. Eli was a furnace. He radiated heat. It made the air around him feel thick, like walking into a tropical storm. She found herself leaning in, just an inch, drawn by the thermal bloom. Eli did not flinch. He did not tilt his neck. He held her gaze, his hazel eyes steady behind his glasses. "Am I doing it right?" he asked softly. Sarilith blinked, snapping back to the moment. She pulled away, annoyed with herself. The hunger was always there, a low-level static in her brain. But with Eli, it was specific. It was not just a need for blood, it was a fascination with his vitality. He was so fragile, yet he sat there mocking the deadliest social structure in the galaxy. "You are adequate," she said coldly, "but your heartbeat betrays you. It jumps when I step close." "It's not fear," Eli said, adjusting his cuffs. "Then what is it?" Eli looked at her, really looked at her, tracing the line of her jaw, the severity of her pale brows, the exhaustion hidden deep in her eyes. "It is admiration, Your Highness. You are very intense. It wakes a man up." Sarilith felt a flush of heat rise in her own cheeks, a rare physiological reaction she had not felt in decades. She turned away sharply, her cloak swirling around her ankles. "We are finished for today," she snapped. "Do not be late for the evening council." The boundaries of their strange marriage were drawn later that night, over a dinner that neither of them ate. Sarilith sat with a goblet of synthetic nutrient plasma. Eli sat with a plate of imported earth grains that looked dry and unappetizing. The table was long, a slab of black volcanic glass, but Sarilith had dismissed the servants. "We need to establish rules," Sarilith said, staring into the red depths of her glass. "The court is talking. They call you my pet. They say I keep you for amusement, or for a midnight snack." Eli poked at his food with a silver fork. "I have been called worse things. Bureaucrat stings more. Honestly, I am serious." "Eli," Sarilith looked up. Her face was grave. "I will not have you treated as livestock, but I also will not have you forget what I am." "I know what you are," Eli said. He put the fork down. "You are the apex predator of this sector. You could tear this table in half with one hand." "Yes," Sarilith said, "and because of that, there will be no feeding. I will never drink from you. Not for ritual, not for sustenance, not for pleasure. It is a line we will not cross." Eli leaned back in his chair. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Okay," he said, "that is your rule. Here is mine." Sarilith arched an eyebrow. "You have demands?" "I have a condition," Eli corrected. "I am not a prop. I am not a pet. If we are in this room, alone, I am just a man and you are just a woman. I don't bow to you in private. I don't play the game. If you want a husband who cowers, you should have married a lesser vampire. If you want me, you get the sarcasm and the bad posture." The air in the room grew heavy. It was a negotiation of power, stripped of all the flowery court language. Sarilith felt a spike of irritation, followed immediately by a reluctant respect. He was refusing to be diminished. "Agreed," she said softly. The moment stretched, charged, and intimate. It was the first time they had agreed on something that wasn't survival. It felt like a pact. Sarilith felt a strange phantom sensation, a warmth spreading through her chest, unconnected to the blood ring she wore. It was the feeling of being seen, not as a title, but as a person. The court, however, was less interested in Eli's personhood and more interested in his humiliation. 2 nights later, at the Grand Assembly, Lord Kalen made his move. Kalen was a cousin of Chancellor Vulcan, a preening aristocrat with a taste for cruel sports. The assembly hall was packed, the air thick with perfume and ozone. Kalen approached the dais where Sarilith and Eli stood. He bowed low to Sarilith, then turned to Eli with a sneer that showed too much gum. "Master Ward," Kalen boomed, his voice carrying to the back of the hall, "I must apologize. I did not realize the princess had brought her livestock indoors. I assumed you would be housed in the stables with the other draft animals." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It was a calculated insult, designed to provoke a reaction. If Eli got angry, he looked feral. If he cowered, he looked weak. Sarilith stepped forward, her hand going to the hilt of her ceremonial dagger. But Eli moved first. He placed a hand gently on her arm, a shocking breach of protocol, and stepped down one stair so he was eye level with Kalen. "Lord Kalen, is it?" Eli asked pleasantly. Kalen blinked, taken aback by the casual tone. "It is." Eli nodded, as if recalling a grocery list. "I was reading the Sanguine Compact last night. Fascinating literature. Specifically, Section 12, Paragraph 4, regarding the rights of guests within the royal radius." Kalen frowned. "What are you babbling about, human?" Eli continued, his voice projecting clearly without shouting. "It states that any insult directed at a member of the royal consort's immediate household is considered an insult to the throne itself, punishable by a duel of honor or, and this is the interesting part, a forfeiture of 1/10 of the offender's blood holdings to the offended party." The room went silent. The vampires stared. Humans were not supposed to know the compact. Most vampires didn't even know the obscurer clauses. Eli smiled, a thin, sharp expression that mirrored Saralith's own. Now, I am sure you did not mean to insult the throne, Lord Kalen. That would be treason. So I must assume you were simply offering me a donation? I do hear your estate produces excellent vintage. Kalen turned a shade of gray that was unflattering even for the undead. He looked at Saralith, then back at the smiling, harmless-looking human who had just legally cornered him. Misunderstanding, Kalen choked out. A jest. A jest, Eli repeated. He looked at Saralith. See, my dear? I told you they had a sense of humor. Saralith fought the urge to laugh aloud. It was a savage victory. She looked at Eli with new eyes. He had weaponized their own bureaucracy against them. He was not just surviving. He was playing the game. But games had consequences. Later that week, Saralith intercepted a decrypt burst from a planetary comms relay. It was a log of her movements, times, locations, security protocols, sent to an encrypted frequency. She traced the signal signature. It was not a random spy. It was the Sanguine Ledger, a shadow organization that sold secrets to the highest bidder, usually to destabilize noble houses. Someone inside the palace was paying them to track her. She needed to get Eli off-world. The capital was becoming a cage. Pack your things, she told him, throwing a travel bag onto his bed. We are going on a tour. A honeymoon? Eli asked, looking up from a book. An inspection, she corrected. The donor worlds are restless. We are going to visit the harvest sites. It will look like a diplomatic tour. And in reality? In reality, I am hunting a leak. And you are safer moving than standing still. They took a private corvette, a sleek vessel named the Obsidian Dart. They left the heavy Gothic atmosphere of the capital behind, soaring out over the night deserts. The landscape of Vale was haunting. Below them, endless dunes of black sand shifted like waves. Bioluminescent cacti, 60 feet tall, glowed with eerie blue light. They visited ruined biotemples where the ancestors had first spliced their DNA with the native fauna. And they inspected the vein rail relay stations that pumped harvested blood across the continents. But the real destination was the orbital chapel of St. Ethelgard. It was a derelict station in high orbit, a place of silence and dust. Saralith docked the ship manually. Why are we here? Eli asked as they floated through the airlock, their magnetic boots clanking against the deck. There is something here I need to see, Saralith said. The Ledger's transmission pinged off this station. It is a dead drop. They moved deeper into the station. The walls were engraved with blood-written equations, mathematics rendered in dried crimson pigment. It was the language of the hemocode, the programming language of biology itself. In the central nave of the chapel, they found it. It was not a computer. It was a loom, a massive arachnid machine hung from the vaulted ceiling. It was made of brass and bone, with thousands of translucent tubes feeding into a central weaving chamber. Inside the chamber, nanites swirled like red dust, constructing complex helix strands. A hemocode loom, Saralith whispered. I thought they were all destroyed after the Reformation. She stepped closer, horrified. This device was forbidden. It could rewrite the genetic loyalty of a species. It could turn free-thinking beings into thralls, or erase entire memories from a bloodline. She heard a sharp intake of breath behind her. She turned. Eli was staring at the machine. His face had gone completely white. He wasn't looking at it with confusion or curiosity. He was looking at it with recognition. He walked past her, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the control console. His fingers hovered over the keys, keys that were marked in ancient veil glyphs. He knows the layout, Sarilith realized. The thought hit her like a physical blow. He knows where the power coupling is. Eli's hand brushed the metal. He flinched, as if burned. Then, he seemed to realize Sarilith was watching him. He forced a jagged smile onto his face. "Creepy," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Looks like a glorified sewing machine for nightmares. Does it come in beige?" Sarilith did not smile. She stepped toward him. "You know what this is," she said. Eli swallowed. "I've never seen it before in my life." "Lie." Sarilith grabbed his wrist. Her grip was iron. "Do not lie to me. Eli, you looked at the input manifold before you even looked at the core. You know the architecture." "I'm an engineer," Eli stammered, his eyes darting away. It follows logical fluid dynamics. I just..." Kelang. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the hull. A docking clamp. "We are being boarded," Sarilith hissed. She released Eli and spun around, her dual kinetic blades extending from her bracers with a snicked hiss sound. Mercenaries. The airlock blast doors blew inward. Smoke filled the corridor. Figures in heavy combat armor poured through, laser rifles whining. "Get behind me!" Sarilith shouted. She launched herself into the fray. She was a blur of motion, a whirlwind of death. She severed gun barrels, kicked armored men through bulkheads, and moved faster than the human eye could track. It was the violence she had been bred for, but there were too many of them. 12, 15, 20. They were professional kill teams, moving with tactical precision. 2 of them flanked her, heading straight for Eli, who was crouching behind a pillar. Sarilith screamed a warning, but she was engaged with 3 others. Eli did not cower. As the first mercenary rounded the pillar, Eli didn't scramble away. He stepped into the guard space. He grabbed the barrel of the rifle with one hand, twisted it down, and drove the palm of his other hand into the mercenary's throat. It was a precise, brutal strike to the trachea. The mercenary gagged and dropped. Eli stripped the sidearm from the man's holster in one fluid motion. Pop, pop, 2 shots. Center mass, into the second attacker. The recoil didn't even make him blink. He spun, dropping to one knee, and fired 3 more shots at suppressive angles, forcing the main group to take cover. Sarilith saw it all in her peripheral vision. The efficiency, the economy of motion. That was not a diplomat. That was not a scribe. That was a soldier who had spent a lifetime in the dark, with the mercenaries pinned by Eli's fire. Sarilith finished the rest. She tore through their lines, a phantom of rage. Within 60 seconds, silence returned to the chapel. The air smelled of ozone and burnt flesh. Sarilith stood amidst the carnage, her chest heaving, her blades dripping. She turned slowly to face Eli. He was standing by the pillar, the pistol held at a low, ready position. His glasses were crooked. He was breathing hard, but his hands were steady. He looked at her, and he knew he had made a mistake. He lowered the gun slowly. "Drop it," Sarilith said. Her voice was terrifyingly quiet. Eli dropped the gun. It clattered on the deck. Sarilith crossed the distance in a heartbeat. She slammed him against the wall, her forearm pressed against his chest, pinning him. Her face was inches from his. "Who are you?" she roared, the veneer of the princess cracking to reveal the monster. Eli stared back at her. The adrenaline was crashing through both of them. Sarilith could feel his heart hammering against her arm, a frantic, staccato rhythm. Her own blood was singing, the predator instinct screaming that he was dangerous, that he was prey, that he was something else entirely. The proximity was electric. They were both shaking. It was fear. Yes, but it was also a raw chemical attraction born of violence. Sarilith wanted to kill him. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted to tear the truth out of his throat. "Tell me," she commanded. Eli closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. He looked defeated. "I wasn't just a scribe," he whispered. "I was recruited by the Black Horizon program, Earth Intelligence." Saralith's eyes widened. Black Horizon. The rumors of a human Black Ops division studying xenotech. "You are a spy," she spat. "I was a researcher," Eli said urgently, "a specialist in xenobiological interfaces. They brought me in to study things, tech we found in crash sites, tech like that." He nodded toward the loom. "You came here to steal our secrets?" Saralith pressed her arm harder against his chest. "No!" Eli shouted. "I came here to escape. I walked away. Saralith, I defected. I couldn't do what they wanted me to do. They were trying to weaponize it. They wanted to use blood code to make super soldiers. I erased my files and I requested a transfer to the diplomatic corps. I thought if I came to Vale, the last place they'd look for me is in the royal palace." Saralith stared at him. He was terrified, but the truth was ringing in his voice. "Why should I believe you?" she asked. "Because," Eli said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "because the tech we were studying, it didn't come from a crash site. It was shipped to us, with a manifest stamped by the Crimson Court." Saralith froze. "What?" "Check the mercenaries' datapad," Eli said. "Check who paid them." Saralith released him slowly. She walked over to the leader of the mercenary team, a hulking corpse in power armor. She ripped the datapad from his wrist gauntlet and hacked the encryption. It took seconds. The transfer order was there, the payment for the hit, and the funding for the Black Horizon program on Earth was authorized by a shell company. But the routing number. The routing number belonged to the Imperial Treasury. Saralith dropped the pad. It clattered onto the blood-slicked floor. Her father, her government. They were funding the human experiments. They were giving the humans the technology to build weapons, presumably to justify a war later on. It was a cycle of manufactured conflict. Saralith felt the world tilt. Everything she believed, that the Empire was harsh but necessary, that they protected the galaxy from chaos, was a lie. They were the chaos. She looked at Eli. He was still leaning against the wall, rubbing his chest where she had pinned him. He looked small again, stripped of his soldier's mask. He wasn't a harmless husband. He was a man running from his own sins, hiding in the den of the monsters who had created them. He realized his harmlessness had been a costume, a way to survive, and she realized her control was a myth. "We are both fools," Saralith whispered. She walked back to him. She did not pin him this time. She stood in front of him, the silence of the chapel pressing in around them. "You lied to me," she said. "I had to." Eli said, "You would have killed me." "I might still kill you." "I know." They stood there, the tension shifting from violence to something profoundly sad. They were two people trapped in a machine much larger than themselves. Saralith looked at his chest. His heart was still racing. Without thinking, she reached out. She did not grab his throat. She placed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart. Eli stopped breathing for a second. He looked down at her hand, the pale, deadly hand of a vampire, resting over the fragile cage of his ribs. He didn't pull away. He covered her hand with his own. His palm was warm, rough with calluses. Hers was cold, smooth as glass. They stood like that for a long time. No feeding, no kiss, just the shock of closeness. The feeling of his heartbeat thumping against her palm, a frantic, stubborn rhythm of life in a place of death. It was rebellion, in a galaxy that wanted them to be enemies, in a room designed to rewrite loyalty. They were choosing to simply stand there, hand in hand, heart to heart. "We cannot go back to the way it was," Sarilith said softly. "No," Eli agreed. "We can't." "Then we go forward," she said. She pulled her hand away, the warmth lingering on her skin like a phantom burn. She turned to the airlock. "Come, husband. We have a war to prevent." As they walked back to the ship, stepping over the bodies of the men sent to kill them, Sarilith realized that the prophecy might be true after all. The vampire princess thought her human husband was harmless. She had never been so happy to be wrong. The council chamber of the Crimson Court was not designed for debate. It was designed for sentencing. The acoustics were sharpened by the obsidian walls so that every whisper sounded like a scream, and the lighting was tuned to a harsh, interrogation-grade white that left no shadow for a lie to hide in. Chancellor Vulcan stood in the center of the floor, bathed in that unforgiving light. He held a data crystal aloft as if it were the skull of an enemy. "Blood terrorism," Vulcan declared. His voice was a velvet hammer, striking the silence of the room with precise, heavy blows. There is no other word for it. The riots on the donor moon of Kalor were not spontaneous. They were engineered. We have intercepted communications proving that the reformist faction within this very court provided the weapons. A murmur rippled through the gathered nobility. It was a sound of performative shock. Everyone knew Vulcan was lying. But on Vale, truth was less important than the quality of the fabrication. Sarilith sat on the dais, her knuckles white as she gripped the arms of her chair. She looked at the faces of the reformist lords, Lord Vane, Lady Alara. They looked pale, terrified. They were being framed, and the frame was being built out of their own desire for peace. Vulcan turned his gaze to Sarilith. His eyes were cold, ancient things. "Your Highness," he said, "the Empire bleeds. Order must be restored. The Council has drafted a resolution. We call it the Pacification Protocol." A hologram materialized in the air. It was a list of coordinates, target sites on 3 major donor worlds. "Authorize the orbital bombardment of these sectors," Vulcan said. "Burn the infection out. Show the galaxy that the Crown does not tolerate treason." Sarilith stared at the map. The sectors were residential, millions of lives. He was asking her to sign a death warrant for 3 million people to secure her political position. "And if I refuse?" Sarilith asked. Her voice was steady, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. Vulcan smiled. It was a thin, joyless expression. "Then we must assume that the Crown is compromised," he said softly. "We must assume that your judgment has been clouded, perhaps by foreign influence." He gestured to the side of the room. 2 Crimson Guards stepped forward, flanking Eli Ward. Eli stood near the scribe's alcove. He was wearing his court formal wear, looking uncomfortable but alert. He met Sarilith's eyes across the room. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Don't do it. I will not rule a graveyard." "Chancellor," Sarilith said. She stood up. The movement was sharp, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. "I will not authorize mass slaughter to quell a riot that you likely started yourself." Gasps filled the room. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Vulcan did not flinch. He merely sighed, the sound of a disappointed parent. "I feared this," he said. "You are unwell, Princess. You have been infected by weakness, and I believe I know the source." He pointed a long, pale finger at Eli. "The human is a security risk," Vulcan announced. "His presence has destabilized the monarchy. Therefore, under the Emergency Powers Act, I am revoking his diplomatic status. He is no longer a husband. He is to be processed." "Processed?" Eli asked. He stepped forward, ignoring the guards. Is that a euphemism for executed? No. Mr. Ward, Vulcan said, we are civilized. You will be registered. The word drained the blood from Sarilith's face. Registration was a fate worse than death. It was a ritualistic stripping of legal personhood. It involved a neural shunt that reduced a sentient being to property, docile, obedient, and incapable of independent thought. It was used for dangerous criminals and prized pets. Seize him, Vulcan ordered. Sarilith did not think. She acted. She vaulted over the railing of the dais, landing in the center of the floor with a crash of boots and armor. The impact cracked the obsidian tiles. She drew her kinetic blades. They hummed to life, glowing a furious violet. Anyone who touches him dies, she snarled. The court froze. For a vampire to draw a weapon in the council chamber was a heresy punishable by execution. But Sarilith was the heir. She was the apex predator in the room, and right now she was cornered. Vulcan looked at her with mock pity. Treason it is, then, he said. Guards. Take them both. The escape was not graceful. It was a chaotic, desperate scramble through the service corridors of the palace. Sarilith ran, her cloak billowing behind her, gripping Eli's hand so hard she feared she might crush his bones. They burst out of a waste disposal chute into the lower levels of the city. The air here was thick with steam and the metallic tang of recycled coolant. We need to get to the starport, Sarilith shouted over the roar of the city. We are currently the most wanted people on the planet, Eli yelled back. He was struggling to keep up with her supernatural speed. Maybe we should not run down the middle of the street. Sarilith skidded to a halt in an alleyway. She looked at Eli. He was distinctive, too human, too clean. You need a disguise, she said. She looked around. The alley was piled with refuse and discarded cargo containers. She ripped a tarp off a crate of synthetic protein mash. It was a heavy, oil-stained fabric. Put this on, she ordered. Eli looked at the tarp. It smells like rancid gravy, he noted. Would you rather smell like a corpse? Sarilith asked. Point taken, Eli said. He wrapped the tarp around his shoulders like a shawl, pulling a hood over his head. How do I look? Like a mysterious traveler? You look like a pile of garbage that gained sentience, Sarilith said. It is perfect. Come. They moved through the crowds of the lower city. The atmosphere was feverish. Holographic propaganda was raining down from the sky like red snow, billowing projections of Vulcan's face, repeating loop after loop of lies. The princess has been bewitched. The human is a parasite. Report all sightings. They reached the Vainrail station. It was a cavernous hub where the living trains pulsed and writhed in their tubes. The crowd was dense, workers, thralls, and low-caste vampires moving in a current of bodies. We have to blend in, Sarilith whispered. Keep your head down. Do not look anyone in the eye. I know the drill, Eli muttered from beneath his gravy tarp. Look miserable. Hate everything. Precisely. They pushed through the turnstiles. Sarilith moved with the stiff, jerky gait of a low-born laborer, hiding her face. Eli shambled beside her. Suddenly, a security drone hovered over them. Its scanner swept across the crowd with a grid of green lasers. Identification. The drone chimed. Sarilith tensed. She prepared to summon her blades. Eli leaned into her. He coughed, a wet, hacking sound that sounded genuinely tubercular. Back off. Tin can. Eli rasped at the drone. My wife has the blood rot. Unless you want your sensors corroded, I suggest you fly away. The drone paused. Its logic processor's word. Blood rot was highly contagious and damaging to sensitive equipment. Clearance denied. Quarantine protocol advised. The drone chirped and zipped away to harass someone else. Sarilith looked at Eli. Blood rot? She whispered. I improvised, Eli whispered back. Also, you really do look terrible in this lighting. I am going to kill you, she promised. Later, Eli said, run now. They boarded a cargo rail heading for the outer rim. The train was a biological nightmare. The walls were warm and ribbed, throbbing with a slow peristalsis that pushed the cars forward. They huddled in the back of a container filled with jagged scrap metal. As the train surged forward, accelerating to 300 miles an hour, Saralith let out a breath she felt she had been holding for hours. Where are we going? Eli asked. He had shed the tarp and was sitting on a pile of copper wiring. The Null Archive, Saralith said. Eli frowned. I have read the planetary schematics. There is no such place. It is not on the maps, Saralith said. It is a ruin in the Badlands. It predates the Empire. My grandmother told me about it before she was executed. She said it contains the truth of our history. The truth Vulcan has been scrubbing from the record. And why do we think we can get in? Eli asked. If it is a secret vampire vault, won't it kill me on sight? No, Saralith said. She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the tunnel. The legend says the doors only open to a mixed blood signature, one of the night and one of the sun. Eli stared at her. That sounds suspiciously like a prophecy, he said. Saralith nodded. It does, and I hate prophecies. But we have nowhere else to go. The Badlands were a graveyard of ships and geology. Jagged rock formations tore at the sky, and the wind howled with a sound like dying engines. They found the archive buried beneath the skeleton of a crashed dreadnought from a war 1,000 years forgotten. The entrance was a simple circle of matte black metal, flush with the rock face. There were no handles, no keypad, only 2 depressions in the center, shaped like hands. Saralith stepped up to it. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Place your hand here, she said, pointing to the right depression. Eli hesitated. What if it just eats my arm? Then you will have a very interesting story to tell, Saralith said. She placed her hand in the left depression. Nothing happened. The metal was cold. Eli took a breath. He reached out and placed his hand in the right depression. The reaction was instantaneous. A shockwave of sound blasted through the canyon, and it wasn't an alarm. It was a chord, a harmonious, resonant hum that vibrated in their teeth and bones. The matte black metal of the door suddenly flushed with light. Not the harsh red of veil technology, but a warm, brilliant gold. Ancient glyphs ignited on the surface of the door, spiraling outward from Eli's hand. Saralith stepped back, gasping. She stared at the glyphs. I can hear it, she whispered. Hear what? Eli asked. The door was getting warm under his hand. The voice, Saralith said. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. The system is singing. It is speaking a dialect of High Valic that has been dead for centuries. But I understand it. What is it saying? It is saying, welcome home, son child. She looked at Eli with a mixture of horror and awe. It is talking to you. The massive circular door split down the middle and rolled aside. A breath of stale, dry air exhaled from the darkness within. They stepped inside. The interior of the Null Archive was not a library. It was a cathedral of light. The walls were lined with crystals that glowed as they walked past, illuminating rows of data spires. In the center of the room stood a single pedestal. Saralith approached it. A holographic interface sprang to life. It didn't show weapon schematics or tax records. It showed history. It showed 2 planets, Vale and Earth. This is the first pact record, Saralith said, her voice trembling as she read the scrolling text. She read it aloud, translating the archaic symbols. In the time before the dark, The Veil were dying. Our blood magic had consumed us. We were drifting into madness, the hunger tearing our minds apart. We sought a counterbalance. We found the sun remnant. She looked up at Eli. Humans, she said. You were not conquered. You were not found by accident. The ancient veil sought you out. She continued reading. The blood of the sun remnant carries the solar code. It is the anchor. It is the only thing that can stabilize the corruption of the hemocode. A bond between veil and human is not a weakness. It is a biological necessity for our survival. Without the sun blood, we become monsters. She turned to the next section. Her breath hitched. However, in rare lineages, the solar code is concentrated. This is the soul blood. It is not just an anchor. It is a key. A soul blood carrier can override the hemocode. They can dismantle the blood logic. They can turn the darkness off. Silence filled the archive. Eli stared at his own hands. He turned them over, looking at the blue veins beneath his pale skin. Soul blood, he whispered. That is what the scientists at Black Horizon called it. They didn't tell me what it meant. They just said I was potent. Sarilith looked at him. She backed away slowly, until her back hit the cold crystal of a data spire. You are a weapon, she said. Her voice was hollow. You are a living kill switch for my entire civilization. That is why the ring warmed up, Eli realized. That is why the loom terrified me, because I could feel how to break it. Sarilith slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. She looked small, stripped of her armor and her courtly arrogance. I married the one thing that can destroy me, she said. Vulcan was right. You are a threat. Eli walked over to her. He did not loom over her. He knelt on the floor, sitting cross-legged in front of her. I am not a weapon, Sarilith, he said softly. You can turn off the blood magic, she said. You could strip us of our power. You could leave us helpless. I could, Eli admitted. Then why don't you? She asked. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears she refused to shed. We are monsters. We feed on your kind and we treat you like cattle. Why didn't you destroy the loom when you had the chance? Why didn't you let the drone hit me? Eli reached out. He took her hand. His skin was warm, burning against her cold flesh. Because you are not a monster, he said. You are Sarilith. You are arrogant and bossy, and you have terrible taste in disguises, but you are not a monster. He squeezed her hand. And I am not a weapon. I am a husband. I took a vow. The words hung in the air, heavier than the stone above them. Sarilith looked at their joined hands. The contrast was stark, dark and light, cold and heat, predator and prey. The hunger hit her then. Not the hunger for blood, but the hunger for him. It was a fierce, desperate ache in the center of her chest. It was the terrifying realization that she wanted him more than she wanted her throne, more than she wanted safety. She leaned forward. Eli met her halfway. They did not kiss immediately. They stopped with their foreheads touching, breathing in each other's air. Sarilith could smell the salt on his skin, the dust of the Badlands, and the deep, terrifying sweetness of his blood. I could kill you, she whispered against his mouth. It is so easy. You are so fragile. I know, Eli whispered back. I am afraid, she confessed. It was the first time she had ever said those words aloud. I am afraid that if I start wanting you, I will never stop. And then I will be weak. Loving something that can destroy you isn't weakness, Eli said. His hand moved up to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. It's the bravest thing you have ever done. She broke. She closed the distance, capturing his mouth with a fierceness that was almost violent. It was a kiss of desperation, of two people standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump together. Eli didn't pull away. He anchored her. He held her as she shook, his hands tangled in her hair, his body a solid, warm wall against her trembling form. It was dangerous. Every instinct in Saralith's biology screamed that he was food, but her heart, that ancient silent organ, screamed that he was necessary. They broke apart, gasping for air. Saralith rested her head on his shoulder. She felt grounded. For the first time in her life, the constant gnawing noise of the bloodthirst was quiet. His presence silenced it. "We need rules," she murmured into his neck. "Okay," Eli said, his voice ragged. "Rule number 1, no dying. Rule number 2, Saralith said, pulling back to look him in the eye. "You do not use your blood to control me, and I do not use my power to control you. We are partners." "Partners," Eli agreed. Saralith stood up, pulling him with her. She felt stronger. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. "We have the truth now," she said, gesturing to the archive. "Vulcan has been lying for centuries. The humans aren't our enemies. They are our other half." "And I can stop the loom," Eli added. "Yes." Saralith's face hardened. "But we are running out of time." As if on cue, the archive's comm system crackled to life. It was an automated intercept, picking up a planetary broadcast. A holographic screen flickered in the air. It was Chancellor Vulcan. He was standing on the balcony of the palace, fires burning in the city behind him. Citizens of Vale. Vulcan's voice boomed. "The time for mercy has passed. The reformist terrorists have attacked the donor world of Orin. They have slaughtered our garrisons. This is an act of war." Saralith stared at the screen. Orin. That was the most populous donor world. "He did it," she whispered. "He attacked his own people to justify a purge." Vulcan continued. "To ensure the safety of the Empire, I am authorizing the purification protocols. The fleets are mobilizing. We will cleanse the galaxy of this sedition." "Long live the Crimson Court." The transmission cut out. Saralith stood in the silence. The blood war had begun. She looked at Eli. He was bathed in the golden light of the ancient glyphs, looking determined and terrified and painfully human. "We have to go back," Saralith said. "We have to stop him." "I know," Eli said. He turned to the console and pulled the data crystal containing the first pact. He held it up. "We have the proof," he said. Saralith nodded. She walked over to the entrance of the archive. As they prepared to leave, a recorded voice echoed from the shadowed ceiling of the vault. It was a fragment of an old audio log, triggered by their departure. It was the voice of a courtier from centuries ago. A historian recording the final days before the darkness fell. The prophecy was clear, the voice said, tinny and distorted by time. The vampire princess thought her human husband was harmless. Saralith froze. It was the title of the story she had lived. She waited for the rest. Until the blood war revealed his true. The audio cut out with a sharp hiss of static. Saralith looked at the speaker. "Why did it stop?" she asked. Eli looked at the console. "The file is corrupted," he said. "Someone tried to delete it a long time ago, and Vulcan, probably." He scrubbed the end of the sentence. "Revealed his true what?" Saralith asked. Eli looked at her. He pocketed the crystal. "I guess we are going to have to write the ending ourselves," he said. Saralith looked at him. Really looked at him. The harmless husband, the diplomat, the weapon, the son-child. She took his hand. "Let us go." "Husband," she said, "I believe we have an empire to burn." They stepped out of the archive and into the howling wind of the Badlands, leaving the safety of the past to face the fire of the future. The war for Vale did not begin with a declaration. It began with a scream that tore across the upper atmosphere. The sky above the capital was a chaotic tapestry of laser fire and burning debris. The obsidian dart, once a sleek diplomatic courier, was now the flagship of a desperate ragtag fleet. It wove through the heavy cruisers of the Imperial Navy, its hull groaning under the stress of evasive maneuvers. Inside the bridge, Princess Saralith stood at the tactical table. The room was shaking. Sparks rained from the ceiling panels as a near miss rocked the ship. "Status report," she barked, her voice cutting through the klaxons. "Shields are at 30%, a rebel officer shouted from the comms pit. "We have lost the port stabilizer. The Imperial dreadnought Crimson Verdict is tracking us." Saralith looked at the holographic display. It was a massacre. Her coalition, a fragile alliance of reformist noble houses, retrofitted mining barges from the donor worlds, and defecting military units, was being hammered. They were fighting for freedom, but Vulcan was fighting with the precision of a machine. Propaganda broadcasts flooded every frequency, bleeding into the tactical comms. Vulcan's voice, calm and fatherly, echoed through the bridge speakers. "The traitor princess has returned," the voice intoned. "She comes not to liberate, but to destroy. She has been corrupted by the human parasite. She seeks to feed our great empire to the wolves of Earth." Saralith grit her teeth. "Cut that feed," she ordered. Eli Ward stood beside her. He was no longer wearing the ill-fitting suits of a diplomat. He wore a scavenger's armor, mismatched plates of black plasteel strapped over a flight suit, grease-stained and battered. He looked like a soldier who had forgotten how to sleep. "They are jamming our coordination frequencies," Eli said, his fingers flying across a hard light keyboard. "He is trying to isolate the donor ships. If they get cut off, the Navy will slaughter them." "Can you bypass it?" Saralith asked. "I can try," Eli said. "But Vulcan is using a carrier wave I have never seen before. It is not standard encryption. It is biological. He is using the loom to broadcast the jamming signal through the blood of his own pilots." Saralith looked at him, horror dawning. "He is weaponizing his own fleet's biology? He is turning them into antennas," Eli said grimly. The ship lurched violently. Saralith grabbed the tactical table to stay upright. Her hand brushed Eli's. For a second, amidst the fire and the shouting, the world narrowed down to that point of contact. His skin was warm. It was the only warm thing in a universe of cold vacuum and cold blood. "We need to hit the source," Saralith said. "We cannot win a dogfight against a fleet that thinks with one mind." "The source is not the ships," Eli said. He pulled up a new schematic. "It is the tribunal city of Ethelgard." Saralith stared at the image. Ethelgard was a floating metropolis, suspended in the lower atmosphere by massive anti-gravity engines. It was the seat of the judiciary, a place of marble and biomechanical horror where the blood priests dispensed the law. "Why there?" she asked. "Because that is where the signal is originating," Eli explained. "And that is where he is keeping them." "Them?" Eli hesitated. His face went pale. "He sent me a message on a secure channel 10 minutes ago," Eli said quietly. "He has the Earth cohort, the refugees I helped settle in Sector 7. The ones I promised were safe." Saralith felt a chill. Vulcan was not just fighting a war. He was playing a game of psychological dissection. He knew Eli's weakness was his conscience. "It is a trap," Saralith said. "I know," Eli replied. His eyes were hard, devoid of the humor that usually lived there. "But if we do not go, he will feed them to the loom. He is going to use them as fuel to jumpstart the planetary broadcast." Saralith looked at the tactical map. Then she looked at the crew. Vampires and humans fighting side by side, terrified but loyal. "Signal the fleet," Sarilith commanded. "All ships are to engage in hit-and-run tactics. Keep the Navy busy. The dart is going into the atmosphere. The descent into Tribunal City was a vertical drop through hell." Flak cannons painted the sky with black puffs of exploding ordnance. Sarilith piloted the ship herself, her reflexes faster than the automated systems. She wove the corvette between the spires of the floating city, dodging defensive fire until they crash-landed on a landing pad intended for ceremonial barges. The ramp hissed open. "Move!" Sarilith shouted. She and Eli led a strike team of 6 commando defectors. They sprinted across the rain-slicked landing pad toward the Cathedral of Judgment. The architecture of Ethelgard was oppressive. Statues of weeping angels held scales made of real bone. The doors of the cathedral were 50 feet high, carved from obsidian. They blew the doors with a breaching charge. Inside, the air smelled of incense and iron. The nave was a cavernous space where the pews were filled not with people, but with silent, kneeling thralls, citizens who had already been processed, their minds wiped clean, waiting for orders. At the far end of the nave, on a raised dais, sat the blood priests. They were terrifying figures, their bodies fused into mechanical thrones, tubes cycling glowing red fluid through their exposed organs. And standing before them was Lady Ilara. Sarilith stopped. "Ilara," Ilara turned. She was one of Sarilith's oldest friends, a reformer who had fought for the rights of the donor worlds. But now, her eyes were wrong. They were a flat, milky white. Her posture was rigid. "Welcome, traitor," Ilara said. Her voice was not her own. It was a monotone broadcast, layered with a digital screech. "She has been rewritten," Eli whispered. He raised his rifle. "No!" Sarilith slammed his barrel down. "Do not shoot her. She is gone." "Sarilith," Eli said urgently. "Look at her veins. They are black. The hemocode has taken her." Sarilith stepped forward. "Ilara, look at me." Ilara's face twisted. A spasm of pain crossed her features. The struggle beneath the surface was visible, the person fighting the program. "Princess," Ilara gasped, her voice cracking. "Please, fight it," Sarilith commanded. "I cannot." Ilara wept. The tears on her face were red. "He is in my head. He is in my blood. He wants me to kill you. Please, Sarilith, end it. Kill me before I hurt you." Ilara raised a kinetic pistol. Her hand was shaking violently, fighting her own muscles. She pointed it at Sarilith's chest. "Do it!" Ilara screamed. "Mercy is death. Give me mercy." Sarilith looked at her friend. She looked at the pistol. The tactical choice was simple. Kill the threat. The vampire choice was simple. Cull the weak. But Sarilith was no longer just a vampire. She holstered her blades. She sprinted forward, stunned not to kill, but to catch. Ilara fired. The shot grazed Sarilith's shoulder, burning through the armor, but Sarilith did not stop. She closed the distance and tackled Ilara, knocking the gun away. She pinned her friend to the marble floor. "I am sorry," Sarilith whispered. She didn't strike to kill. She struck a precise nerve cluster in Ilara's neck, a non-lethal paralyzing blow taught to healers, not warriors. Ilara went limp, unconscious but alive. Sarilith stood up, breathing hard. Her shoulder was smoking. "You could have died," Eli said, reaching her side. "Mercy isn't softness," Sarilith said, staring down at her friend. "It is choosing to see the person even when they are trying to kill you. If I kill her, Vulcan wins. He wants us to become monsters." "I refuse." A slow clapping echoed from the shadows behind the altar. "Very touching," Chancellor Vulcan said. He stepped out from behind a tapestry depicting the First War. He was flanked by 4 Praetorian guards, massive, genetically bulked warriors in crimson armor, but ultimately futile. Vulcan continued. You cling to these human sentiments as if they will save you. They only make you slow. He gestured to the floating screens above the altar. The broadcast flared to life. It was being beamed to every screen on Vale, every ship in orbit, and every data pad in the system. Citizens of the Empire, Vulcan announced to the cameras, I present to you the proof of the conspiracy. A holographic diagram appeared in the air. It was a DNA helix. But it was not a normal helix. It was burning with a gold luminescence. This is the genetic profile of Eli Ward, Vulcan said. You have been told he is a diplomat, a husband, a man. He is none of these things. Look closely. The hologram zoomed in. The code was artificial. It bore the digital watermarks of genetic engineering. He was not born. Vulcan declared. He was designed. 30 years ago, the Crimson Court entered into a covert agreement with the Earth Coalition. We provided the raw hemocode. They provided the genetic canvas. The goal was to create a hybrid, a being capable of interfacing with our technology, to serve as a bridge. Saralith froze. She looked at Eli. Eli was not looking at the screen. He was looking at the floor. But Earth betrayed us. Vulcan went on. They twisted the design. They created a weapon, a soul blood carrier designed to overload our infrastructure, a walking bomb sent to our world to enslave us. And your princess. He pointed a trembling finger at Saralith. She invited this weapon into the royal bed. The silence in the cathedral was absolute. Saralith looked at Eli. Is it true? Eli looked up. His eyes were full of a terrible, ancient sadness. I did not know about the deal, he whispered. I knew I was engineered. I knew I was part of the Black Horizon project. But I didn't know Vale helped make me. So you are a weapon, Saralith said. The words tasted like ash. I was built to be one, Eli said. But I chose to run. I escaped the lab. I escaped the program. I came here to hide from what I was. Vulcan laughed. It was a dry, skeletal sound, and now the truth is out. The princess is a traitor, sleeping with a biological weapon manufactured to destroy her people. He looked at the camera. Execution is the only remedy. Saralith looked at the camera drone hovering above them. She looked at Vulcan, smug in his victory. He thought he had shamed her. He thought the revelation that her husband was a weapon would break her. She stepped forward, into the light. She grabbed Eli's hand. She lifted it high in the air, displaying it to the galaxy. You are right. Chancellor, she shouted. Her voice boomed through the cathedral, amplified by the broadcast. Vulcan blinked, his smile faltering. He is a weapon, Saralith declared. Look at him. He carries the fire of the sun in his veins. He has the power to burn your loom to ash. He has the power to break every chain you have forged. She turned to the camera, her eyes blazing with a fierce, regal defiance. He was made to destroy us. But look at whose hand he holds. He had the power to kill me 1,000 times. Instead, he saved me. He had the power to break the Empire. Instead, he tried to save it from itself. She squeezed Eli's hand. You call him a weapon to frighten us. I call him a choice. He is a weapon that refuses to fire. He is a man who chose love over programming. And that makes him stronger than you. That makes him more Vale than you will ever be, because he understands the value of the blood he carries. The feed did not cut. The technicians in the control room were listening. The soldiers on the ships were listening. Vulcan's face twisted in fury. Kill them! He screamed at the Praetorians. The room exploded into violence. The battle for the cathedral was a blur of motion. The Praetorians were fast, faster than standard vampires, enhanced by the very drugs Vulcan had outlawed for others. Sarilith met the first one head-on. Her kinetic blades clashed against a heavy vibro-axe. The impact rattled her teeth. She ducked under a swing that would have decapitated her, slicing the hamstring of the guard. Eli was moving. He didn't have the strength of a vampire, but he had the soul blood reflex. He saw the attacks before they happened. He slid across the marble floor, firing his rifle with impossible precision, hitting the unarmored joints of the guard's armor. "Go!" Sarilith shouted. "The access to the loom is behind the altar. I am not leaving you," Eli yelled, taking cover behind a pew as plasma fire chewed up the wood. "You have to!" Sarilith parried a blow and kicked a guard into a stone pillar. "You are the only one who can interface with the core. Go! I will hold them." Eli looked at her. The air between them crackled with the energy of the fight and the terrifying, desperate love of people who might be saying goodbye. "I will come back for you," he promised. "Always," she replied. He vaulted over the altar and sprinted into the darkness of the rear chamber. Sarilith turned back to the remaining guards and Vulcan. The Chancellor had drawn his own weapon, a slender, elegant rapier that hummed with dark energy. "Just you and me." "Princess," Vulcan hissed. Sarilith spun her blades. "Just us," she agreed. "And the ghosts of everyone you murdered." Eli ran. The corridor behind the altar was a glass tube suspended over nothingness. Below him, the machinery of the city churned. Ahead, the entrance to the loom's primary node pulsed with a rhythmic red light. He burst into the chamber. It was a nightmare of biology and engineering. The loom was massive, a beating heart of metal and glass. Transparent tubes the size of tree trunks ran from floor to ceiling, filled with rushing, glowing blood. This was the central processor for the planetary consciousness. Eli approached the console. His hands were shaking and he had to touch it. He had to let the soul blood interact with the hemocode. He placed his palms on the interface surface. Connection established. The world dissolved. Eli was no longer in the room. He was everywhere. He was in the data stream. Pain ripped through his mind. It wasn't physical. It was existential. The loom tried to reject him, tried to scrub his consciousness. He fought back, pushing his own genetic code into the system like a virus. Then, the visions hit him. The loom was a probability engine. It showed him what would happen if he failed. Vision 1. He saw Sarilith on the throne. Her eyes were red and dead. She was signing execution orders. She had become the monster she feared to save the Empire. She ruled a galaxy of graves. Vision 2. He saw himself. He was hooked into the machine, a living battery. His humanity was gone. He was a weapon of mass destruction, burning entire planets with solar fire. Vision 3. He saw Vulcan winning, the citizens of Vale marching in perfect, mindless unison. No art, no laughter, no dissent, a piece of the grave. No! Eli screamed into the void. He pushed harder. He poured every memory of warmth, every joke he had told Sarilith, every moment of awkward kindness into the machine. He weaponized his humanity. The system began to fracture. The red light of the blood tubes began to flicker, turning a violent, unstable orange. Warning, system overload imminent, biological failsafe required. The voice of the computer echoed in his skull. To invert the pulse, a sacrifice is required. The soul blood must burn. Eli realized the cost. To reverse the polarity, to turn the loom from a slaver to a liberator, he couldn't just hack it. He had to be the fuse. He had to overload his own blood. It would kill him, or it would burn away the human parts of him and leave something else behind. Back in the cathedral, Sarilith felt it. She parried Vulcan's rapier, locking blades with him. Suddenly, a wave of heat washed over her. It came from the altar room. "Eli," she whispered. Vulcan felt it too. He looked toward the door, his eyes widening in true fear for the first time. "What is he doing?" Vulcan screamed. "He is rewriting the story," Sarilith said. She kicked Vulcan back, sending him skidding across the floor. She turned to run to Eli, but the doors to the inner chamber slammed shut, locked by the system. "Eli!" she screamed, pounding on the obsidian doors. "Open the door! Inside the chamber!" Eli could hear her. He could hear the panic in her voice. "I can't. Sarilith," he whispered, tears streaming down his face as the golden light began to consume his hands. "I have to finish this." He looked at the console. The prompt blinked. Initiate overload? He thought of the apartment on Earth he would never see again. He thought of the cold purple sky of Vale. He thought of Sarilith's laugh, the one she tried to hide. "I love you," he said to the empty room. He pressed his hands down. The loom screamed. A column of blinding gold light erupted from the tribunal city, piercing the clouds and shooting into space. It wasn't a laser. It was a beacon. The shockwave hit the cathedral. The stained glass windows shattered. Sarilith was thrown back, shielding her eyes as the world turned white. Above the planet, the ships of the Imperial Navy suddenly went dark. The coordination signal severed. The pilots woke up. On the ground, the thralls blinked, looking around in confusion as the red fog in their minds lifted. The hemocode was broken, but inside the chamber, in the heart of the blinding light, Eli Ward screamed as his blood began to burn. The explosion that rocked the orbital crypt ship's silent requiem was not subtle, but then again, neither was the woman detonating the charges. Princess Sarilith vaulted over a burning console, her black cloak snapping in the artificial gravity like a whip. She landed in a crouch, kinetic blades humming, as 3 automated sentries rounded the corner. "Move!" she shouted, slicing the first drone in half with a backhanded strike. Eli Ward scrambled over the wreckage behind her, clutching a canister of refined star fuel to his chest like a newborn baby. He looked terrible. The soul blood overload in Ethelgard 3 weeks ago had left lightning fern scars tracing up his neck and disappearing into his hairline, glowing faintly gold whenever his heart rate spiked. Right now, he was glowing like a beacon. "I am moving," Eli yelled back, ducking as a laser bolt singed the wall next to his ear. "But this fuel is heavier than it looks, and you are running at vampire speed. I am running at survival speed," Sarilith corrected. She kicked the second drone into the third, causing a shower of sparks. "We have 90 seconds before the containment fields lock down. If we are still here, we become permanent residents of the crypt." They sprinted down the main corridor of the floating mausoleum. This was the reality of the war now. No grand fleets, no pitched battles, just desperate, starving raids on the edges of the Empire to keep their rogue coalition flying. Vulcan had tightened his grip on the core worlds, and the resistance was running on fumes. They reached the airlock. Their ship, the battered obsidian dart, was clamped to the hull. Eli tossed the fuel canister to a waiting crewman and collapsed into the pilot's seat, gasping for air. "Get us out of here," Sarilith ordered, strapping herself into the co-pilot chair. The dart detached with a metallic groan, thrusters firing hard to push them away from the crypt ship just as the internal bulkheads slammed shut. Eli wiped sweat and grease from his forehead. "You know," he said, his voice ragged, "when I imagined marrying royalty, I pictured more banquets and less larceny." Sarilith checked the sensor array, her eyes scanning for Imperial patrols. "You are complaining," she noted without looking at him. "I am observing," Eli corrected. "I am observing that we just robbed a graveyard to power a spaceship. It is very Gothic. Very on brand for you. Saralith fought a smile. The banter was their armor. It was the only thing that kept the screaming horror of the last month at bay. Next time, I will let you carry the explosives and I will carry the heavy fuel, she said. Eli laughed, a sharp sound. Oh no, I have seen you with explosives. You enjoy the boom too much. It is unsettling. The smile faded from Saralith's face as a proximity alarm chimed. We are clear, she said softly. Jump to Slipstream. They returned to their temporary base, a hollowed-out asteroid in the debris field of a dead moon. The atmosphere inside was tense. The coalition was fraying, every day. Vulcan's mercy broadcast reached further. The promise of peace, of an end to the fear, was seducing the exhausted population. All they had to do was submit to the hemocode loom and be rewritten. Saralith walked through the command center, ignoring the stares of the soldiers. She went straight to the data tank where they analyzed the files Eli had pulled from the crypt ship's mainframe. She pulled up the logs. She was looking for troop movements, supply lines, anything they could use. Instead, she found a ledger. It was an accounting file from the First Age, encrypted with a royal cipher. Saralith watched as the text scrolled across the screen. Her blood ran cold. What is it? Eli asked, stepping up beside her. He had cleaned up, but the gold scars were still pulsing on his neck. Saralith did not answer. She pointed at the screen. The donor worlds, she whispered. We were taught that we conquered them, that we offered them protection in exchange for a blood tax. It was the foundation of our moral code. The strong protect the weak, and the weak sustain the strong. Eli read the file. His eyes widened. Breeding coefficients, he read aloud, harvest yields, genetic culling schedules. They were never conquered, Saralith said, her voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned. They were seeded. The Crimson Court found those planets uninhabited thousands of years ago. They planted human populations there like crops. They guided their evolution. They created the wars on those planets to keep the populations manageable. She turned away from the screen, revulsion twisting her stomach. It is not a tax, she said. It is a farm. My entire empire, my entire history, is a slaughterhouse disguised as a civilization. Eli reached out, taking her hand. His touch was grounding. This changes the objective, Saralith said. She looked at him, her eyes hard and dry. We cannot just defeat Vulcan. We cannot just take the throne. If I become empress of this system, I am just the new head butcher. We have to dismantle it, Eli said. Yes. Saralith squeezed his hand. We have to break the wheel. Later that night, in the small, cramped quarters they shared, Eli laid out the schematics for the countermeasure. The loom is designed to broadcast, he explained, pointing to a holographic diagram of the device that sat at the heart of the capital city. It takes the hemocode, the command to obey, and pulses it through the blood of every citizen. That is what Vulcan is doing now. He is ramping up for a mass conversion event. And we stop it by destroying the loom, Saralith asked. No, Eli said. If we destroy the loom while it is active, the feedback loop will kill everyone connected to it. Half the planet will die of a brain hemorrhage. Saralith paled. Then what is the option? Inversion, Eli said. He tapped the core of the hologram. I can use the soul blood frequency to invert the signal. Instead of a command to obey, we send a command to release, a liberation pulse. It will scrub the artificial loyalty markers from the blood. It will restore autonomy to every thrall, every soldier, every citizen. But, Saralith asked. She heard the hesitation in his voice. But the soul blood is too volatile on its own, Eli admitted. We saw what happened at Ethelgard. It almost killed me. And that was just a local overload. To do this on a planetary scale, I would burn out before the signal propagated. I need a stabilizer. He looked at her. I need a biological anchor, he said softly. Someone with royal blood. Someone whose genetic code is already keyed to the loom's administrative access. Me, Sarilith said. Eli nodded. I channel the pulse. You stabilize it. We become a circuit. What will happen to me? Eli hesitated. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. It will rewrite you, he said finally. The soul blood will mix with your vampire physiology. It will burn out the predatory instincts. You might lose your strength. You might lose the hunger. You will certainly lose your connection to the Crimson Court's lineage. You will be something new. A hybrid. The nobility will never accept you as one of them again. Sarilith walked to the viewport. Outside, the stars were cold and distant. They will call me a mongrel, she said, a traitor. They will call you free, Eli said. Sarilith turned back to him. The choice was not difficult. The realization of the blood farms had killed the last remnant of her loyalty to the old ways. Do it, she said. Eli stood up. He walked over to her, stopping inches away. The war, the exhaustion, the fear, it all seemed to vanish, leaving only the gravity between them. Are you sure? He asked. Once we do this, there is no going back. You will never be the vampire princess again. Good, Sarilith whispered. I never liked the title anyway. She reached up, tracing the gold scar on his neck. I am afraid, she confessed. Me too, Eli said. He kissed her then. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the archive. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was acclaiming. In a universe that wanted to turn them into tools, him a weapon, her a monster, this was an act of defiance. They moved together into the narrow bunk, the darkness of the room softening the sharp edges of their reality. There was a fierce urgency to their touch, a need to memorize the texture of skin and the rhythm of breath. It was a choice to protect, not to possess. Sarilith pressed her face against his chest, listening to the heavy, steady thud of his heart. She realized that this was what she was fighting for. Not a throne, not an empire, just the right to lie in the dark with the man she loved without the world trying to tear them apart. You are my anchor, she whispered into the dark. And you are my compass, Eli replied, his arm tightening around her. The final assault began 2 days later. It was not a subtle infiltration. It was a riot. The coalition forces launched a suicidal diversionary attack on the orbital shipyards, drawing the bulk of Vulcan's fleet away from the capital, while the sky burned with ship-to-ship combat. Sarilith and Eli led a small strike team into the city of Oakhaven via the old sewage outputs, the veins of the city. They fought their way up through the levels. Sarilith was a whirlwind of violet steel, cutting a path through the thrall guards. Eli moved behind her, using his modified rifle to disable the biolocks on the blast doors. They reached the Plaza of Silence, the obsidian courtyard that led to the palace and the loom. It was a trap. As they crossed the open ground, gravity inverters slammed on. Sarilith and Eli were pinned to the ground, crushing weight pressing the air from their lungs. Chancellor Vulcan walked out from the palace gates. He looked impeccable in robes of white silk, unstained by the war. Did you really think it would be this easy? Vulcan asked, his voice amplified across the plaza. He gestured, and the gravity field shifted. Sarilith was yanked into the air, suspended in a stasis field 10 feet off the ground. Eli remained pinned to the stone, struggling to breathe. "Take her to my chambers," Vulcan ordered. "Leave the human. He can watch the broadcast like everyone else." Sarilith was thrown onto the cold floor of the Chancellor's private sanctum. The room was a glass box overlooking the city. In the center of the room, a terminal displayed the status of the loom. Conversion imminent. 90% charged. Vulcan poured himself a glass of vintage blood wine. He looked at Sarilith with genuine disappointment. "I offered you the world. Sarilith," he said. "You offered me a cage." Sarilith spat, struggling to her feet. "I offered you order," Vulcan snapped, his composure cracking. "Look at them." He gestured to the city below. "They are confused. They are scared. They need a shepherd. The loom gives them peace. It takes away the burden of choice. It takes away their souls," Sarilith shouted. Vulcan sighed. He walked over to her, invading her space. "I have a proposition," he said softly. "I can stop the conversion for the nobility. I can carve out an exception for the court. You can rule as empress. You can keep your mind. All you have to do is divorce the human. Denounce him. Let the loom rewrite the rebels. And I will let you sit on the throne." Sarilith looked at him. She looked at the man who had been her teacher, her tormentor, the architect of her pain. She thought of Eli. She thought of the scars on his neck. She thought of the farm data. "You still do not understand, do you?" Sarilith said, her voice low and dangerous. "Understand what?" "I do not want the throne," Sarilith said, "and I will not be a queen of cages." She moved faster than he expected. She didn't attack him. She attacked the window. She channeled every ounce of her remaining strength into her shoulder and rammed the polarized glass. It shattered. Sarilith dove out into the open air, falling 50 stories toward the plaza below. She didn't scream. She reached for her belt and fired her grappling line. It caught on a gargoyle 3 floors down. She swung in a wide arc, smashing through the lower window of the loom chamber. Inside the chamber, Eli was already there. He had not stayed pinned. He had overloaded the gravity emitter with a soul blood surge, blowing the generator apart. He was currently fighting 2 Praetorian guards near the core. Sarilith crashed through the window in a shower of glass. She landed on the first guard, driving her blades through his armor. "Eli!" she shouted. "Sarilith!" Eli yelled, ducking a vibroaxe. "The console!" They fought back to back. The room was hallucinating. The loom was active, and the air was thick with bleeding code, holograms of DNA strands that flickered and dripped like red rain. The walls pulsed with the heartbeat of the city. They cleared the guards. Sarilith shoved a heavy crate against the door to buy them time. Together. They ran to the central control node. "This is it," Eli said. He was trembling. The energy in the room was overwhelming. "Connect me," Sarilith said. Eli grabbed a set of injector cables from the machine. He jammed one into his own arm and the other into Sarilith's wrist. The pain was immediate. It was white-hot agony. Sarilith threw her head back, a scream tearing from her throat as her blood connected to the machine. She felt the soul blood hit her system like a collision of stars. The door buckled. Vulcan was burning through it. Vulcan's voice boomed over the intercom system in the room. "You cannot stop history," Vulcan shouted. "You are a footnote. Sarilith, a tragic error." The door exploded inward. Vulcan strode in, his rapier drawn, crackling with dark energy. He stopped when he saw them connected to the machine. He smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. He looked at the display above their heads. It showed the file name of the operation Eli was initializing. It was the same file from the ancient archive. "Ah," Vulcan said. You found the old prophecy, the one I scrubbed. He walked closer, unhurried. Do you know why I deleted the end? Vulcan asked. Because it was embarrassing. It was too literal. He pointed his sword at Eli. The vampire princess thought her human husband was harmless. Vulcan paused, savoring the moment, until the blood war revealed his true origin. Sarilith glared at him through the haze of pain. What does that mean? She gasped. It means, Vulcan said, his eyes gleaming, that he is not just a weapon made by Earth, he is a weapon made by us. The soul blood is not a mutation, my dear. It is the original blood of the Vale Kings, before we corrupted ourselves with shadow. He is not a foreign enemy. He is the rightful heir you were never strong enough to be. The revelation hit Sarilith like a physical blow. Eli was not an anomaly. He was a restoration. He carried the blood of the ancients, the kings who ruled before the hunger took over. He is the cure, Sarilith whispered. And that is why he must die. Vulcan snarled. He lunged. Sarilith didn't have her weapons. She had cables in her arm, but she had the machine. Start it, she screamed at Eli. Eli slammed his hand onto the activation panel. Liberation pulse. Initiated. The world turned white. Sarilith felt her very DNA unspooling. She felt the vampire nature, the cold, the hunger, the predator, burning away in a fire of golden light. She looked at Eli. He was screaming, his back arching as the energy poured out of him and into her, and threw her into the city. Vulcan was thrown backward by the shockwave, his sword clattering away. The light swallowed the room. It swallowed the palace. It swallowed the city. They were on the brink of everything. Life, death, a new world. Sarilith held onto Eli's hand as the fire consumed them, knowing that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The white light in the chamber of the loom was not merely bright. It was heavy. It pressed against the skin like a physical weight, singing with the scream of 1,000 years of repressed history. Princess Sarilith stood in the center of the maelstrom, her hand locked in Eli Ward's grip. The cables connecting them to the machine pulsed with a violent, rhythmic thrumming, gold from him, crimson from her, meeting in the center of the console where their blood mixed. Outside the palace walls, the city of Oakhaven was burning. The reports from the tactical earpiece Sarilith wore were a chaotic collage of desperation. The coalition forces were holding the line at the Vainrail Central Hub, but they were being pushed back by the sheer mass of the Thrall Guards. These were not soldiers. They were civilians, shopkeepers, and musicians whose minds had been wiped clean by Vulcan's broadcast, turned into meat puppets for the regime. Hold the line, Commander Vane's voice crackled over the comms. Do not fire to kill. They are our people. Sarilith grit her teeth. The pain in her arm was blinding, a white-hot line of fire traveling up her veins and into her heart. She looked at Eli. He was seemingly catatonic. His eyes were rolled back, glowing with the intense golden light of the soul blood overload. He was not in the room anymore. He was inside the machine. Eli, Sarilith shouted over the roar of the energy vortex. Stay with me. But Eli was drifting. Inside the digital architecture of the loom, Eli Ward was floating in a sea of red data. It was a river of blood memory, the collective consciousness of the Vale Empire. He was trying to execute the inversion protocol, trying to turn the command of obey into the command of release. But the machine was fighting back. It wasn't using firewalls or encryption. It was using regret. The red river shifted. It formed shapes. Suddenly, Eli was not in the machine. He was back on Earth, in his small apartment in Seattle. It was raining. The coffee maker was gurgling. He was wearing his old cardigan, the one with the hole in the elbow. He was safe. He had never taken the job. He had never met the princess. He had never felt the terror of the obsidian sky. You can stay here, A voice whispered. It was his own voice, but smoother, colder. You can just let go. You were not made for war. Eli, you are soft. You are harmless. Eli looked at the rain on the window. It looked so real. He reached out to touch the glass. Then he remembered the feel of a cold hand in his. He remembered the smell of ozone and blood. He remembered Saralith's voice, terrified and brave, telling him he was her compass. I am not harmless, Eli said to the empty apartment. He smashed his fist through the window. The glass didn't shatter. It dissolved into binary code. The apartment melted away, returning him to the screaming red void of the loom. I am the bridge, Eli roared into the data stream. In the physical world, the backlash of his rejection slammed through the room. The floor buckled. Chancellor Vulcan, who had been thrown against the far wall by the initial blast, was standing up. His white robes were scorched, his hair wild. He held his rapier in a low guard, his eyes burning with a madness that had finally cracked his aristocratic veneer. He charged. Saralith saw him coming. She could not disconnect from the console. If she let go, the circuit would break, and Eli would burn out. She had one hand on the interface, the other free. She drew her kinetic blade with her left hand. Vulcan was fast. He was older than her by 3 centuries, a master of the duel. He lunged, his rapier darting for her throat. Saralith parried, the impact jarring her bone. She couldn't move her feet. She was tethered to Eli. She was a stationary target. You are destroying us, Vulcan screamed, striking again and again. Clang, clang, clang. Sparks showered over Saralith's head. You are diluting the blood. You are turning us into mongrels. I am turning us into people, Saralith shouted back. She caught his blade on her guard and twisted, forcing him back. Suddenly, the room shifted. The bleeding code of the loom began to leak into reality. Ghostly figures materialized in the air, phantoms of what could be. Saralith saw a version of herself standing over Vulcan's corpse. In this vision, she was wearing the Empress's crown. Her eyes were red coals. She looked powerful. She looked safe. She looked completely alone. Kill him, the vision whispered. Take the power. Rule them. It is the only way to be safe. Saralith looked at the vision, then at the real Vulcan. He was panting, sweat dripping down his pale face. He looked pathetic. He was not a monster. He was just a frightened old man terrified of losing control. No, Saralith said to the ghost. Safety without freedom is just a prison. She rejected the vision. The ghost shattered into light. Vulcan lunged again, but this time, he didn't aim for her throat. He aimed for the cable connecting her to Eli. He slashed. Saralith didn't block it with her sword. She blocked it with her arm. The rapier sliced through her armor, carving a deep gash into her forearm. But the cable remained intact. Saralith cried out, the scent of her own blood filling the air, rich and metallic. Vulcan paused, smelling it. His nostrils flared. The ancient hunger, the very thing he claimed to master, betrayed him. For a split second, he wasn't a chancellor. He was a shark-smelling chum. That split second was all Saralith needed. She dropped her sword. She grabbed his lapels with her bleeding hand and headbutted him. It was not a noble move. It was a street brawl move. It was the kind of move Eli would have made. Vulcan reeled back. His nose shattered. Saralith kicked him in the chest, sending him skidding across the obsidian floor. She turned back to Eli. The golden light in his veins was turning white. The scars on his neck were blazing. Eli, Saralith screamed. Do it now, inside the core. Eli reached the center of the web. He saw the hemocode, the complex, spiraling double helix that dictated the loyalty of the Veil race. It was rigid, cold, and absolute. He didn't try to destroy it. He reached out with his soul blood code, the chaotic, warm, solar algorithm of the first pact, and he wove it into the helix. He didn't erase the veil nature. He added to it. He introduced a new variable, choice. He felt the resistance of the machine crumble. It wasn't a wall breaking, it was a door opening, inversion complete. Eli opened his eyes. He looked at Sarilith. His eyes were no longer hazel. They were bright, liquid gold. Together, he whispered. Sarilith nodded. She gripped the console. She felt the change coming. It wasn't just energy passing through her, it was biology rewriting itself. The soul blood was entering her system, hunting down the predator cells, the hunger receptors, the allergy to the sun. It was burning them out. It felt like dying. I accept it, she gasped. She chose to let the vampire princess die so the woman could live. The liberation pulse fired. It started as a sound, a low, resonant hum that vibrated the teeth of every living thing on the planet. Then, the light exploded outward from the palace. It wasn't a beam, it was a wave. It passed through the walls, through the streets, through the atmosphere. In the plaza below, the thrall guards froze mid-step. Their eyes, which had been a dull, uniform gray, suddenly cleared. They looked at their weapons. They looked at the rebels they were fighting. Confusion washed over them, followed by horror. The red fog lifted. On the screens floating above the city, the propaganda loops of Vulcan's face stuttered, the image distorted, the audio slowing down to a demonic crawl, and then the screens went black. A moment later, they rebooted to show the raw feed from the loom chamber, Sarilith and Eli, bleeding and glowing, holding onto each other in the ruins of the control room. In the chamber, the light faded. Sarilith collapsed to her knees. She felt weak, strange. Her heart was beating differently, faster, lighter. The heavy, cold weight that had sat in her chest for 300 years was gone. Eli fell beside her. He was gasping for air, the gold glow fading from his skin, leaving the scars looking like white tattoos. "We did it," Eli wheezed. Sarilith looked at her hands. The wounds were healing, but slowly, much slower than before. She licked her lips. Her fangs felt smaller. She looked at Vulcan. The Chancellor was dragging himself toward the secondary console. He was broken, bleeding, but he was not finished. "You fools," Vulcan hissed. He pulled himself up to the keyboard. "You think you have won because you woke them up? The donor worlds will see our weakness. They will rise up and slaughter us all." He began typing frantically. "What are you doing?" Sarilith demanded, trying to stand. Her legs were like jelly. "The purity clause." Vulcan snarled. "A contingency. If the control signal is broken, the system sends a lethal feedback spike to the harvest implants in every donor on the planet. If I cannot control them, I will liquidate them." He was going to kill millions of people in a temper tantrum. Sarilith tried to rush him, but she stumbled. The transformation had drained her reserves. She wasn't fast enough. Vulcan's finger hovered over the execute key. "I am saving the Empire," he screamed. Sarilith didn't try to reach him. She reached for the data pad on her belt, the one Eli had recovered from the silent requiem. She threw it. It didn't hit Vulcan. It hit the broadcast terminal next to him. "Upload!" Sarilith shouted to the system voice. "Authorization. Princess Sarilith. Authorization accepted." The screens above the city, which had been showing the confused scene in the chamber, suddenly changed. Documents flooded the feed, ledgers, video logs, private correspondence. It was Vulcan's private archive. The citizens of Vale, newly awakened and confused, looked up to see the truth. They saw the records of the blood farms. They saw the orders Vulcan had signed to assassinate reformist nobles. They saw the financial transfers proving he had been embezzling the blood tax for his own immortality treatments. But most damning of all, they saw the treaties. The original treaties with the humans that Vulcan had hidden. Treaties that spoke of partnership, not domination. Vulcan stared at the screen above his head. His own face, from a recording 50 years ago, looked down at him, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the cattle. He froze. His finger hovered inches from the genocide button. He looked at Sarilith. "You destroyed the reputation of the court," he whispered. "I destroyed the lie," Sarilith said. She stood up, shaky but upright. "And now, everyone knows what you are. You have no political capital left, Chancellor. Even if you press that button, the mobs will tear you apart before you can leave this room." Vulcan looked at the door. He could hear the sound of boots running down the corridor. Not guards, citizens. Angry, awakened citizens. He looked at the button. He looked at Sarilith. He realized he was already dead. The myth of his benevolence was gone. He slumped against the console, his hands sliding away from the keys. "You have ruined everything beautiful," he muttered. Sarilith walked over to him. She didn't kill him. She took the rapier from his loose grip and tossed it out the broken window. "Beauty built on bones is just a graveyard," she said. The doors burst open. Commander Vane and a squad of coalition soldiers rushed in. They stopped, guns raised. "Take him," Sarilith ordered, pointing at Vulcan, "and ensure he stands trial. I want everything he says on the record." The aftermath of the Blood War was not a parade. It was a long, difficult silence. The weeks that followed were filled with the messy, unglamorous work of peace. The Treaty of Oakhaven was signed not in the throne room, but in the city square, on a simple wooden table. The blood tax was dismantled immediately. The donor worlds were granted full sovereignty. But the most difficult part was the transition for the Veil themselves. Without the constant influx of high-potency harvested blood, they had to adapt. Synthetic alternatives, once scorned as peasant food, became the staple. The hunger, once a roaring fire, became a manageable ache. Sarilith changed the most. She sat in the medical bay of the palace, watching the sunrise. For 3 centuries, she had hidden from this light. Now, she sat in it. It didn't burn her. It felt warm. Her skin had lost its deathly pallor, gaining a faint, healthy flush. Her eyes were no longer onyx voids. They were a deep, rich brown, flecked with the same gold that now lived in Eli's blood. She was a hybrid, the first of her kind. The nobility, what was left of them, were terrified of her. They whispered that she was impure. They refused to call her empress. She didn't care. She took the title of High Steward instead, a caretaker, not a ruler. The door opened. Eli walked in. He walked with a cane now. The nerve damage from the loom was permanent. He would always have a tremor in his left hand, and the lightning scars on his neck would never fade. He was no longer the invisible, harmless man. When he walked through the city, people stopped and bowed, not out of fear, but out of a stunned reverence. He was the sun child, the man who broke the chains. He sat down beside her, wincing slightly as his legs settled. "The delegation from Earth has arrived," Eli said. "They want to know if the alliance is still valid." "Tell them we will talk," Sarilith said. "But tell them I am bringing my husband to the negotiation, and he drives a hard bargain." Eli smiled. It was the same smile, crooked, self-deprecating. But the eyes behind the glasses were older. They had seen the end of the world and the beginning of another. "How does it feel?" he asked, gesturing to the sunlight streaming over her face. "It itches," Sarilith admitted, "and I feel hungry. But not for blood. I believe I would like a sandwich." Eli laughed. It was a good sound, a human sound. "I can arrange a sandwich." 6 months later, the city of Oakhaven was rebuilding. The obsidian spires were being repaired, but this time, they were being inlaid with white marble and glass, materials that let the light in. The ominous red glow of the vein rails had been retuned to a soft, pulsing blue. Sarilith and Eli stood on the balcony of the Spire of Silence. It was night, but the city was not dark. It was alive with lights, movement, and music. Sarilith leaned against the railing. She wore a simple gown of blue silk, not armor. She felt fragile in a way she never had before. She could bruise, she could bleed, she could age. It was a terrifying gift. Eli stood beside her, his hand resting over hers on the railing. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "The power? The immortality?" Sarilith looked at him. She looked at the city below, where a group of Vale and humans were sitting together at a cafe, arguing about politics without fear. "Power is easy, Eli," she said. "Restraint is hard, and we have done the hard thing." She turned to him. He looked tired, battered, and absolutely ordinary. And he was the most dangerous man she had ever met, because he had changed the universe by refusing to conquer it. She remembered the prophecy, the story the court had told. She smiled, a soft, genuine expression that reached her new, warm eyes. The vampire princess thought her human husband was harmless. She recited softly. She looked at the scars on his neck, then up to the stars that were no longer enemies, until the blood war revealed his true heart. She finished. Eli raised an eyebrow. "That is not how the title ends. I rewrote it," Sarilith said. She leaned in and kissed him. It was a kiss of promise, of a future that was unwritten and terrifyingly free. And I like my version better. Below them, the city hummed, not with the sound of a machine, but with the sound of life, messy and beautiful and entirely their own.